we're talking about tech leaders and cybersecurity professionals,
Sure.
what's something that the pitfall that they would often fall into in trying to convey technical concepts? Because this is something that I've spoken to you about, where you could have a product that's very complex, this technology that achieves all these very, very involved, integrated ideas. How do we strip that down to convey it to our audience that this is the actual value? Because on our end, we're very much in this echo chamber where we hear these words, we hear the tech, we hear this innovation. How do we understand that outside people don't care about that? They want to hear, where does it get me? How is that something that, in my terminology, in a language that normal people understand, that I could really get this? How do we strip that away?
Well, I learned something in one of my leadership roles. I reported to someone who was the VP of marketing at the time, and shout out to him if he sees this or hears this. Name is Rich Severa, and Rich, every time he wanted to make a point with me in a one-on-one conversation, he would lean on some very reliable devices. One was the use of analogies. He was brilliant with his use of analogies. And the great thing about analogies is that you do not have to necessarily be someone for whom the tools in the analogy specifically resonate. It's the story that the analogy tells that speaks to you. I was speaking with a client who's a CEO, and he really, 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 really wanted something to happen. And I said, here's the thing. The boat will not go any faster just because you're leaning over the bow. And that spoke to him. He can want it all he wants. He can lean into it all he wants. It's going to find its way to the surface. It's going to work itself out. When we use an analogy, what we do is we create some imagery, and we may even be able to draw on metaphor. So I think that taking very difficult concepts and making them clear and compelling for the reader, we can do that by using analogies. Here's the thing about this cybersecurity prevention tool. It would be like you coming home and having this and this happen, and you decided to do this to fix it. Oh, I get it now, right? So when you're promoting your product, or you're explaining a product or a platform, work to be able to share the idea with me as though you're speaking to a 10-year-old. People say a 5-year-old, you can't keep a 5-year-old's attention long enough to explain something like this to them.
Yeah. It's like, let's try and be reasonable here. He's a very sharp 10-year-old, but a 10-year-old nonetheless. A 5
That's exactly
I
right.
just try and think about it. It's like shiny lights, candy, shiny lights, candy.
Loud noises.
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
So
Um,
I think that the use of analogy, I mean, in my writing, I remember using I drew on a story from my childhood, because I wanted people in a leadership concept, I wanted them to understand that it's not always about pressing on the accelerator. It's not always about driving in and leaning in as hard as you can. So I used this analogy from when I learned to operate a powerboat on the Long Island Sound when I was a teenager, in that it's accelerate, coast. Accelerate, coast. You don't want to be jerking forward or back. You don't want to have the wake of the boat come up behind you and force the boat forward. You don't always have to have the throttle all the way up. And that analogy has created a lot of conversations. And how powerful would it be for the next piece that you or anyone watching this writes, that piece creates conversations?